So what you're going to have do this week, there's going to be two different things. The first one is going to be Chapter 2, My Stat Lab. So I mentioned this on Friday, but I'll mention it again. Don't start this until after Wednesday's class, right? So I want to be able to talk through what it is that we're going to be doing in Chapter 2, but the homework is due Sunday night, Super Bowl Sunday. If you're emailing me during the game, I'm probably not checking my email. I'm watching the Buccaneers beat the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, I got a fist bump there, right? That's what I'm going to be doing on Sunday. So after Wednesday, though, I would recommend you start it. And then on Friday, if you have questions, we can address them. All right? So that's the first thing that is due. The other thing that is going to be due on Sunday night is not something I want you to be focusing on right now. So mini project number 1, our group project, we're going to be doing that on Friday. We're all on teams. And I will be putting you in a group of 3 to 4 students, and you are going to be sharing what is your name, how is the best way to contact one another, what is the data. I provide you the data, but there's going to be a long list of things to choose from. You are going to choose your data. So really, mini project number 1, this is one person from your group submits it with everybody's name on it. And it's really just going to be about a paragraph. So what data did you select? Did you determine how you're going to contact one another? And what do you expect? Why did you pick the data that you chose? So on Friday, that's what we're going to be doing together. But somebody needs to upload it by Sunday night. So 2 different things due, 1 individual and 1 is group for this Sunday night. All right, there you go. And again, so after the first month, if you guys aren't finding, is this helpful to at least go through and clarify, at least on Mondays, that we can go back and see exactly what it is that we have to do? What our goal this week in Chapter 2? Chapter 2 is all about how do we display data. And the way that we're going to break down this chapter is very much what we did in Chapter 1. Chapter 1, we talked about quantitative versus qualitative, interval versus ratio, ordinal versus nominal, right? We have all these specific types of data, and when we show it, our methodology differs, right? So for the first part here, we're going to be looking at and if anyone gets on me for my spelling, you come up here and try and type things up in real time, right? So we're going to be looking at quantitative data, but it is very finite. So finite means that there's a limited amount of groups that we have. It could be a 0, 1, 2, 3. Or maybe I'm looking at your ages. It's either 18, 19, 20, 21. There's a very finite number of groups that we have. All right, so that's going to be our first step. And then our next step is going to be very different in that it's going to be quantitative, but we have to actually create our own bins. So bins is going to be this buzzword. Bins are what we use to create groups. Okay. So finite means that there's only, say, 3 or 4 different groups that you could be part of. But when it is more continuous data, whether it's discrete or continuous, but when there's multiple different things, we have to group everybody together. That means it is our job to create our own bins, which is probably the hardest part about Chapter 2. How do we create our own bins? if you want to think about your GPA, does anyone know their GPA? Don't tell me, but you have an idea of what your GPA is? It's probably not just a 3, right? Your GPA is not a 2, a 3, or a 4. That'd be very finite. But your GPA is probably a 3.126, or a 3.875, or a 2.9. How do we group them together and still display this information? We have 3,500 students at Florida Southern College. Okay. How do I group them all together? So that's going to be our next thing, quantitative data, but where we have to create our own bins. We're then going to transition to say qualitative data. How do we take these words on campus, off campus, male or female, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior? How do we take these words, which is valuable information, and how do we create our own bins with qualitative data? That's part of chapter 2. That's part of what we're going to be doing today and Wednesday. And then part of chapter 2 is also looking at other types of graphics. So the first 3 bullet points that I have up here, we're going to be creating what's called a histogram. But there are other ways like bar charts, like pie charts. We're going to be looking at how do we create that in Excel. So these are the 4 main things that we're going to be covering in chapter 2. We're going to start it today. We're going to get through most of it by the end of class on Wednesday. On Friday, we're going to be wrapping things up for chapter 2, but then also having times where I send you in your group and you have time to kind of communicate with one another and get started with the group project. All right, very good. So what you're going to hear in a bit is if we go to our Canvas page, if you're online, you guys are already at your computer. If you are here, I see a lot of computers. Most of you are using laptops. Laptops are perfectly fine because that's where you're going to be doing your exam. That's where you're going to be doing your group work and everything else. So to open up the Excel file we're going to start with today, make sure we go to the modules page. Under our unit 1, we already covered chapter 1. That was Friday, that was terminology. This in-class notes and Excel files is where I want you to be going right now. So you open this up, and then you'll see chapter 2, 3, and 4. What we're going to be doing today is obviously chapter 2. So open up the Excel file that you have there. And what you're going to see on the first tab, make sure that you are looking at what I do. I want you guys all to feel comfortable in this class to either unmute yourself or let me know in person. Are you not seeing what I see? Okay, good. Right, so the first tab is looking at, say, the number of absences that a particular student has in a given semester. All right, if we scroll down, we see that there are 60 observations. I know it says 61, but that's because the first tab is the header. So we have 60 different observations. And what I want to do is take this collection. Now, normally in your internship, in your job, you're going to have way more than 60. So we want to be able to look at this 60, but then be able to apply it to 600 or 6,000 different observations. So what our goals are going to be is we're going to be creating a histogram. Our histogram is going to be a bar chart that we use to display the data. The bar chart itself could be of the frequencies or the relative frequencies. So that's our main objective right here. We're going to create a histogram that takes these 60 observations or 6,000 observations and make it readable. Okay. So what is the relative frequency? This is the relative frequency. What we're going to be creating here is the percent a particular bin occurs. So a particular bin, 23% of students are freshmen, 32% of students are sophomores, 46% of students are this, 51% live on campus, 49% live off campus. It's the percent that a particular bin occurs, and I'll show you how we calculate that. We're also going to be looking at a different term.
Professor Paul?
Yes, go ahead.
There's a large glare on the screen, so it's hard to see.
All right.
Are you able to screen share?
Yeah, I should have done that the first place. Thank you for letting me know. Again, these are things that I never had to think about. All right, and now I lost all of it. All right, so let me start over. All right, so you guys can see my screen okay? Online, somebody unmute.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
All right, perfect. All right, so all I was doing here is that I went to modules and the chapter 2 Excel file. Are you guys able to see my Excel now?
Yes.
All right, very good. All right, so again, what we were doing, we were talking about, we're going to be creating histograms. We're going to be creating the relative frequency, which is the percent a particular bin occurs. And the other thing that we're going to be calculating in this chapter is the cumulative relative frequency. So what this is saying is the relative frequency is looking at the percent a particular bin occurs. The cumulative is that bin or below. So for example, in this class, I'll probably have 12% of you will get an A. That's the relative frequency, the percent of students who get an A. The cumulative would be what is the percent who got an A or a B? Okay, so that might be 36% of you might get an A or a B. Or what about if I add the C in there? Maybe 74% of you will get an A, B, or C. So cumulative is adding up some of these frequencies. All right, so relative, particular bin. Cumulative is how we add up multiple groups. All right, so with that being said, the way we calculate the histogram, the frequency, the cumulative relative frequency depends on the kind of data that we have. In our first example, what we're going to be covering today is we have a very finite number of options. Bins are the stats way of saying a group. 0 absences, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How do I take all of my data and put them into a particular group. Our first Excel function that we're going to be using together is we're going to be calculating the frequency. So how many occurrences in our data are of that particular bin? So again, imagine 60 that this is 3,500, right? Students of Florida Southern. Or how many people live in Lakeland? What's your guess? I'm kind of curious. How many people live in Lakeland? 250,000, not quite that big. 110 is about spot on, right? About 110,000 people live in Lakeland, right? We're in the top 15 biggest cities in Florida, right? We might think of it as a small town, but we're not that small of a town. So if you have 110,000 observations, how can we take it and put you into a group? Our Excel command is that we're going to be using is called count if. All right, so notice a few things, and by the end of this week, I think it'll be more second nature to you. But notice I put equals. So any Excel command is going to use the equal sign first. So equals count if. Count if is the command that we are going to be giving to Excel. Count if, open parentheses, and then what you'll see is range, comma, criteria. So range is going to be the entire data set, and the criteria is going to be looking at, in this data set, how many times does this occur? All right. So I'm going to be making a lot of mistakes today on purpose. All right, and this is ideal to try and get understanding of Excel. So count if, open parentheses. Scroll down. I'm going to highlight all of my data. And then comma 0. So what I did is I highlighted my range, which was A1 to A61, comma 0. I'm going to get the correct answer, but I'm doing it in a very terrible way. So I'm going to have you delete this, but I want you to see exactly where my problem occurs. If I press enter, that means there are 2 students who did not miss a single class. There were 2 observations, 1 and 2, that didn't miss an entire thing. Not a single class, right? There are 2 problems with how I coded this. This is something that you do need to know, something that is very helpful with Excel. Notice that I'm hovering now over the bottom right-hand corner. The same for a Mac or a PC. If you hover over the bottom right-hand corner, you can drag it down. So what dragging it down means that it copied and pasted for all the different cells. Notice that it is all 2. This is not the information that we wanted from our data. I made 2 really glaring mistakes. So let me go back up here and take out the equal sign so that you can see my code. So equals count if. I made 2 glaring mistakes. Oh, and there's range and there's criteria. I made 2 mistakes, so one is one of the other. What mistakes do you think I made? Very good. All right, so what it's doing, so it's not so much that there's a label there, but labels are going to be a big part of how we deal with our data. If I were to put count if in quotes number of absences, it would say 1. So it's still looking at a 1, but it's just not finding the 0, right? So that's not the biggest thing here.
How you guys do where you put the dollar signs?
All right, so dollar signs is going to be something we call anchoring. So you can anchor the data set. Still more. All right. So if I have 60 students, so I have a 925 and 1215 today teaching this course. What if I want to add more students to it? I highlighted from A1 to A61. What if I go down and tomorrow's a new day? What if I add a whole bunch of zeros? You would think that the frequency of zeros should go up, but the way that I have it coded is it's still going to be at 2 because it's only reading data A1 to A61. One of the ways we can get around this, let me get rid of these zeros. Is instead of highlighting my data, instead of A1 to A61, I can do A colon A. So what A colon A is going to be is not just predefining my data as A1 to A61, it's saying everything in column A. That way, if I want to add more students, I had 2 new students join on Friday. If I wanted to add these new students, now we can account for it. So A to A is going to give us the entire first column. The other big mistake that I made, instead of typing 0, I should just click on the 0. Close parentheses. So what that means is that I am only looking at column A, and comma criteria is B2. B2 is 0. But now when I copy it down, that B2 becomes B3. It becomes B4, B5, B6, B7, B8. Right? So when I copy it down now, I'm still going to get the first one's the right answer, but when I go to the bottom right-hand corner and drag it down, now it's telling me how many times in column A that a 1 occurred. If I drag it the whole way down, now it is moving. So 2 times a 0 occurred. 1 time a 1 occurred. 13 times a 2 occurred. 16 times a 3 occurred. So it's going through each one of the different groups, the different bins, and it's calculating the frequency. Excel tricks, use A to A, because that is the entire column. Notice the exercise that I did just a few minutes ago. If I go down here, and don't do this. This is just me illustrating a point. If I go down here and add, right now we have 2 zeros, correct? Now in column A, if I go add a whole bunch more zeros, my 2 became an 11 because it's not predefined to A1 to A61, it's predefined to the entire column. All right, so we did our frequencies using this COUNTIF function. The next Excel command that I want to show you, we use COUNTIF, but now use the function count. There are 2 different ways that we can do the number of observations in our data set. We can do equals count. Okay, we did COUNTIF, and now overall count is going to tell me if I do count A to A, what the count function will do is tell me how many cells in column A have a numeric value in it. This will give me my number of observations. If I click enter, I should get the value of 60 because there are 60 numeric values in column A. It ignores row 1, the number of absences, because that's not a numeric value. But count is a really helpful way that we're going to see to get the number of observations. Or another Excel function that I can use equals sum. I can sum up the frequencies. And if I add up the frequencies, I also should get the number of 60, right? There are 60 numeric values. The frequencies are calculated. If I add up the frequencies, I also get the number of observations. So it'll be the same answer. So a couple of little ways that we can get this number of observations. Next, we're going to be calculating our relative frequency. So right now we see that there are 2 students that did not miss a single class. There is one who missed 13 students missed 2 classes. The relative frequency is the percentage that bin occurred. So the percentage, start with your equals. So 2 out of how many? 2 out of 60, right? So if I do divided by 60, when I look at your exam, if you do this, I'm going to take points off. Because 60 might change, right? Right now, there are 60 observations, but what if we're a company that is continually selling products? That 60 is going to go up very quickly. So we don't want to just isolate ourselves to 60. Maybe we do. Let's click on 60. So now we have 2 divided by 6. That'll give us our relative frequency, the percent that bin actually occurs. Now, again, I warned you, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes here. If I see, do you guys get 0.0333? That means 3.3% of the occurrences were 0 absences. Yeah. This one here. Count A to A. So it's counting in column A, how many numeric values are there? So we did correctly calculate this relative frequency. I did not do it very effectively though. This is a mistake that I'm showing you, so you don't make the mistake when it comes to your homework and to your grade. Because if I took this relative frequency, this is the correct value. But if I drag it down, I see, okay, 0.017. That's also correct. But then I get a whole string of error terms. So why did I get this string of error terms? I didn't anchor C11. So every time I started to divide by, you see the second one, the 0.017? That's correct because I have 60 here and 60 here. But then why did I get this div error term? Because it's trying to divide by something that is non-existent. And you can't divide by something that is not there. That is just against the rules of mathematics. So what do I want to do? The relative frequency is equal to, And now this I want you to type because this is correct. 2 divided by, and we're still going to click on C11. On a Mac, it is straightforward to do. You do function F4. Function F4 will create the dollar signs. If you have a PC, how many of you have a PC? I see PC right here. I think it is function. You have your PC, anybody? PC back here? All right, so if you go back and do control function, I think it's control function. So just control function and F4. Okay. Or it's somewhere like that. It's on the map. You're going to do function.
Oh, okay.
PC, so you're using a Mac. It's with a PC, it's a little bit different. Give it down. All right. So if we do, okay, so click on 60. Okay, and then we want to do, I think it's control function F4, and then function. Yeah. All right, so let's do. With the Mac, it is just F4. Yeah, and that's what I was, because I haven't used the PC in a little bit. But there's a way, once you have the dollar signs there, that's what we call anchoring. So if we make this bigger. Putting the dollar signs in there means that C11, when we copy and paste it down, that C11 will not change. So in this case, it'd be 2 divided by 60. It should be, I should open up my PC so I can, yeah. Open up Excel again. Yeah, try to. Alright, we're back.
I think you just press F4.
Just press F4.
Yeah, I don't think you have to do.
And that is very computer specific though, because I know that hasn't worked, that did not work in the fall.
I Googled it and it just.
But look at your specific computer,
Yeah,
because it is very computer specific. Because you have a colon and a divide. Yes. There you go. And then you can drag that down. Other issues? So how do we interpret these values? So right now we're looking at all these different percentages. what I'm going to do, and this is again, this will be the same for a Mac and a PC. If I highlight the data and I go to home, or that should be the same with the PC. In the middle here, you see that it's general. If I want to turn these into percentages, I can turn them into percentages because that's the way that we interpret them. All right, but I want to make sure it's the same for PC, right? You can turn it into percentages. All right, so what we can do here is put in $, and then turn the 11. The 11. You have that. So now you can take the right hand corner and drag it down. And then when you go to home, so highlight all of your data, and then when you go to home, you can see how to turn it into percentages. And I can change the amount of decimal places right underneath here. And maybe I want to make this 2 decimal places. My stat lab is very particular about how many decimal places to use. Right? So you can change it, you can modify it. What I want to kind of get the point across here is I'm going to highlight this one particular cell. 21.67%. What this particular cell is telling us is that 21.6% of all observations are 2 absences. The relative frequency is the percent a particular bin occurs. 21.67% of all observations are 2 absences. I highlight another one. .33% of all observations are, well, what's 18.3? There's 11, but in bin 4. So that means 18.33% of all my observations are 4 absences. And I very well could be misspelling everything. This is a word that I always get wrong, right? But I want you to see what it is that we're doing. This is the relative frequency, the percent a bin occurs. If you need to add a column, we're going to do one more column here that we actually calculate. It's the cumulative relative frequency. The way Excel will interpret this, the number that you are going to get, it's the percent that bin occurs and everything up from it. This is important. If you're taking notes in your Excel file or write this down. In the first bin, the relative frequency is always the same as the cumulative relative frequency. Because there's no bin above it. There's no prior bins that we see. So our cumulative relative frequency is always going to be equal to the relative frequency. This is going to serve as our starting point. Equal D2. That's it. In interpretation, is that there are 3.33% of the data that is in bin 0, and there's 3.3% in bin 0 or below, right? Because there's nothing else below. So it makes sense that they're the exact same in the first bin. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more tricky. To calculate what is the next cumulative relative frequency, it is the previous. So I put equals the previous, which is 3.33, plus how much more is being added to it, plus I'm taking 3.33, the previous, and adding 1.67, which is then going to give me about 5, right? Then I can drag that down. So what it is that I'm seeing here is that 3.33%, that is the bin 0 or below. 5% is bin 0 and 1. Kind of think about like these are the A's, these are the A's and B's. 26.67%, it's every one that is a 2, 1, or 0. Okay, so let me come around and again, we are recording so that you'll be able to come back. Are you getting the same numbers that I do? Same numbers that I do? Same numbers? All right, very good. So let's pick out a few values here. So our interpretation, though, needs to be tailored to what it is that we calculated. So we have 53. So this is one that I highlighted. 53.33% of all observations are what? 3 or less. Right? It's taking everything that is 3, 2, 1, or 0. It's 3 or less observations, or 3 or less absences. Right? Because we started here, bin is 3, and it's 3 or less. Let me do one more. Let me highlight this guy. Okay, so somebody finish my thought here. So 88.33% of all observations are what? 5 or less. Right, it's 5 or less absences. So we calculated the frequency. We did the relative frequency, which is the percent a particular bin occurs, and then the cumulative relative frequency, which is that bin or less. And the way Excel will define it is that bin or higher. Interpretation depends on the data, because this very well could have been A, B, C, or D. So you might interpret it being a C or better. Excel is looking at that bin and the ones that are above it, actually looking at it, physically higher than it. So cumulative frequency is the percent a bin occurs. The cumulative frequency is that bin or below. How do we show it? Is by a histogram. All right, so I kind of want to, we're doing in time, we're doing pretty good, about 10 minutes or so. What we're going to be doing is now creating our own histogram. The histogram, as I typed at the beginning of class, is a bar chart. Let me do it again, because it's not here. So histogram is a bar chart of the frequency or the relative frequency. The picture itself will look identical. One is just in percentages, one is more in the total count. Right? So if we want to compare, so I'm wearing my Drexel University shirt, this is where I went to grad school, so I love Florida Southern. Don't take this as a bad thing. I love Florida Southern, but you're always going to graduate from Florida Southern. I graduate from Elizabethtown and Drexel, and so it doesn't take anything away from Florida Southern here, right? Drexel University, though, has how many students? I think it's up to like 50, 60,000 students compared to Florida Southern that has maybe 3,000 students. If you look at the frequencies, the numbers are going to be very different between Drexel and Florida Southern. So it might be better to look at the percentage, because percentage takes into account the size of the school, right? The scale of what we're looking at. It can be either way. So let's do frequency first. And there's a couple Excel tricks that there's a reason why I'm doing this, to show it to you. So what I'm doing is I'm just highlighting the frequency, including the word and going down to the number 3. Same for a Mac or a PC. Insert. And then in the middle of the insert, you're going to see the bar chart. So it is, mine is blue, yellow, and is that red? Red, this column, this bar chart in the center of your screen. Click on that, and then we're going to do the first one, a 2D column. You should see something that looks like this. Now, a couple of little things. We can change the title. So this is a histogram of absences. We could make it look pretty. So same with a Mac or PC. If you go to chart design, I could make this look pretty cool, right? So I took these 6,000, or this is only 60, but if I have 6,000 observations, I can make into a nice histogram that shows my frequencies. There is one glaring mistake about this. Saying 2, 1, 1, 2, 13, 3. Are those correct? Is this actually the right values? 2 should be 0. 1 should be 1. 13 should be 2. But my horizontal axis is wrong. Now, how can we fix this? Click on your charts, PC or Mac. Click on it. You can go to chart design. Chart design is where I changed, made it look pretty, or however you want to make it look, right? What I want to focus on here is the select data option. Now, this is the same for Mac and PC, but it's about to get a little bit different. If I select data for a Mac, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see an option here, horizontal axis label. That's what we're going to be using for a Mac. If you have a PC, you will see 2 side-by-side blocks. Right? So where are my PC? Right? You see the 2 side-by-side? Yeah, so side-by-side. So do 1, 2. So click there and then select data. So you're on the Mac, so we're just going to be looking at the horizontal axis. You see the 2 side-by-side blocks. You're going to be using that edit button. If you're using the PC and you see the side-by-side blocks, there's going to be an edit where you click on edit, and then you can highlight the same thing I'm about to show you. if you're on a Mac, horizontal at the right-hand side here is where you click and you highlight 0 through 7. So for a PC, it's on the right-hand block, you click edit, and you can highlight 0 through 7. What this will do is bring it back, click OK, is now it changed, instead of starting at 1, it started at 0. So now it is accurate. Let's do it again. This is good practice. We're less than a week into the semester here, so let's practice this again. So I said a histogram could be a bar chart of the frequency or the relative frequency. Let's do it again. What I want to do is create another chart, the relative frequency. I highlight my data. I highlight the relative frequency. I go to Insert, and I go to my bar chart, which is in that center, that kind of upper left center chart. Notice that it looks exactly the same in terms of shape, right? Because one is just in the raw number, one is in percentages. So it's the same information that we're getting, but we still have the wrong axis. So let's go through this again to make sure we have the right axis, which you'll need for your group project and for the exams. So click on the chart. Under chart design, you're going to see select data. Select data. For a PC, again, you'll see 2 separate blocks. On the right-hand side, you're going to click edit. For a Mac, there's only one here that says horizontal. Click on the horizontal, and then I click on my 0 through 7. So now I have histograms presented in 2 different ways, one in the number and one in the percentage. Questions? Those online, I can't see you guys because I have my computer on here. Any questions? Anything in the chat? Yeah. Let me see if it's something real quick, and then I'll show what we're doing on Wednesday. Yeah, I think it's just. So click on 3. You have to enter the C. The $sign. And then drag it down. Then there is, so take the 3.33, 0.33. There should be, all right, so the last few minutes to wrap up here, what we did is we looked at quantitative data, which is finite. The next set, and this is going to be probably the most difficult part of chapter 2, is when we have this quantitative data, but it's not just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Or it's not just one of these 3 groups. It is when we have data. In this example that we're going to be using here, is your credit card balance. How much money do you have on your credit card? This could be continuous, it could be discrete, but the thing is, you probably don't have the exact same amounts. If all of us have a credit card, and we went to Wells Fargo, or if we went to Capital One, if we looked at our bank statement, we probably all have a very different amount of money that we owe, correct? Some of you are zero. I am sure is not zero. I have to pay off my credits the first of the month. I guess I have to do that this afternoon, right? Pay off my credit card. There is no way that we can create a bin for each one of these specific values. We have to create a group of it. And that's what's going to be challenging. How many groups do we form, and how big should the groups actually be? So on Wednesday, we're going to be creating our own bins. And also on Wednesday, we're going to be looking at, I have an example up here, which one of the positive things I did over quarantine in last year is I got rid of Verizon, I switched to Spectrum, everything. So Spectrum now owns me, right? But we can look at how do we take these words and create our histograms with our words. So that's going to be Wednesday, that we try to form our own groups, and then we use qualitative data. Friday, what we're going to be doing is we're all going to be online. I'm going to be showing you some little things about pie charts and line charts and things like that, but then also putting where you can get to know the group that you're in. All right, so that's our plan for this week. Let me end the way I began. Keep in mind, write this down. Chapter 2 homework is due Sunday night, and you will have the group project due Sunday night as well. It's a mini project with 5 points, and your group will do that and submit it on Friday. All right, so nothing to do tonight. Enjoy your night. After Wednesday, then I recommend you doing your homework. All right, fair enough. Happy Monday. Enjoy this beautiful weather. It's actually not hot. In a few weeks, it's going to be very, very hot. All right, thank you everybody online, and keep reminding me if I'm not sharing my screen to let me, just remind me.
Before we go, Kennedy's right there. She wanted me to point that out to you.
Oh, hi Kennedy. So did I miss her? Oh, there she is.
She was
All
in
right.
the bathroom when you did attendance.
All right. You can tell Kennedy that she is marked as here. Yeah.
I have a question. So I think I have to buy the Excel. I can't just use the free one.